that's been since the inception of the project, so I'm pretty excited to be able to present the results today. I'm working under Dr. Julie Savage and her husband, Dr. Tom Seibert, and so they've been, pretty much critical to getting the entire project off the ground. And then Henry Pollack is sort of like the new blood in the team, and he'll be presenting next, so more on that later. So as you know, Guam, I was going to say has, or had, but I just want to say has. It has an incredibly diverse native avifauna. So these are all the birds that are native to Guam. And unfortunately, a large chunk of them are temporarily missing from the island due to the invasion of the brown tree snake, which I'm sure everyone in this room knows about. We do have two species remaining, the chachaguac, or the swiftlet, and the sali, and both of those species are quite restricted in their range right now. So, they're still here, and everyone says they're still here, but they are restricted, so they're also feeling the brunt of the brown tree snake invasion. So, this is sort of the situation that we have. We have the presence of an invasive predator that is not showing any signs of going away right now. However, we do have sali that are demonstrating some resilience. So they're still hanging in there, and they're still around. So given that, we do have the possibility to try kind of some creative measures to expand their range. And so by figuring out why they were able to persist, we can maybe figure out a way forward into kind of expanding them, even potentially while the snake is still present. And there is some potential applicability to other species, especially the Micronesian kingfisher, the sea heck, which is also a cavity nester. And so potentially through our work with the sali, we can help figure out a way forward for the sea heck as well. And the idea for using nest boxes for sali is not new. A few years ago, Julie in her dissertation wrote basically prophetic words that kind of showed us a way forward. Starling populations could be augmented using nest boxes placed on concrete telephone poles. So there you go. So just a quick timeline of the work that we've done. I showed up in April of 2015, and I started under Shane, who quickly departed, Shane Cyrus, who a lot of people in this room know. Shane started, and then I quickly followed, studying the remaining sali nests on Anderson Air Force Base, which is where basically the entire sali population on Guam remains. And then we quickly moved into testing a variety of different prototypes of kind of nest boxes that people have used around the world for similar birds, and just trying to see what might work. And we're especially looking at the internal temperature because we knew we'd have to place these in exposed locations, and we didn't want to cook the birds. In November of 2015, we installed the first nest boxes, got zero interest whatsoever for the first 6 months, didn't even see a single sali land on the box, look at a box, nothing. So we were sort of panicking, trying to figure out, we had not that much time left in the original grant, and so we're just trying to figure out some solution. And Dr. Tom Seibert kind of was cruising the internet looking. He figured out that people avoid putting perches on nest boxes because European starlings will just go and use those nest boxes. So why wouldn't we put a perch on our nest box to attract the sali? Maybe that would work. So we did that, as well as enlarging the entrance hole a little bit, roughening up the roof so they wouldn't slip. And sure enough, within a week, we had starlings nesting in the boxes, and quickly kind of, using up all of the available real estate. And so that was great. A few months later, we passed 100 chicks fledged from the nest boxes. And now, in April of this year, we started a different project, the Survey project, actually banding and radio tracking the starlings. So, things moved pretty quickly on this. So really quickly, we just sort of slapped the boxes up on the concrete poles using stainless steel strapping, so it's really solid. It would stay up in a typhoon. maybe the box would fall apart. Hopefully it wouldn't. But it's pretty much permanent. We put up 2 different types of boxes. This is sort of important for a point later in the talk, but we put up just PVC boxes, which are really nice in that they stay cool, almost cooler than ambient temperatures. But we also put cedar boxes up there just in case the birds just wanted a natural product, wanted to use wood more than anything else. So, we had at least some options for them, and we're interested in seeing how they would kind of pick and choose the boxes. So I or we, whoever, there are a whole bunch of people who have contributed to the monitoring, but we go out and look for nesting activity in all of the boxes every 2 weeks. And then for the active boxes, we check them a little more regularly just to make sure everything is going okay. And then we ban the chicks at 15 days, which is a date we sort of settled on as an appropriate date. And then we transmitter them right before fledgling, so at 23 days. So having the boxes up is a pretty awesome opportunity, not only for protecting the sali from brown tree snakes, but also for just doing research. So a few of the things we've been able to kind of easily access and monitor while we're just monitoring the birds is figuring out their incubation period, their nestling period, their kind of like plumage development throughout the nestling period, the frequency of breeding throughout the year, if it changes within a year. It also helps for banding the birds. It also helps for putting transmitters on the nestlings as well as the adults. And so it actually is a really kind of useful tool. And the sali are a regionally common bird. They're not just on Guam or in the CNMI. They're in the rest of Micronesia as well. But there really isn't all that much known about their breeding biology, so this is a cool opportunity to do some other research. And this is a figure I just borrowed from Henry. So what we're looking at in this talk is the incubation period and the nestling period. Henry's going to go on and talk about the post-fledgling period, which is another interesting and understudied period of kind of bird biology. So we've been able to do a lot. So let's look at the results. So most of our boxes are now occupied. So, for the birds out there that are still looking for housing, there's a little bit probably more competition. But we have 73% of our boxes, all the boxes that we installed that have birds breeding in them. So that happened pretty quick. We've monitored 227 different nesting attempts as of when I wrote the abstract, so a lot more now. So they're just breeding all the time. We've seen up to 13 nesting attempts in a single box, so these birds are incredibly prolific. And for birds that we monitored for at least a year, they had on average almost 7 nesting attempts in a year. So that's amazing, and that's exciting for being able to sort of restore the population on Guam, because it could probably happen quicker than we even would ever have thought. And the majority of the nesting attempts have been successful. So 68% of all nesting attempts have successfully fledged at least one chick. And this is despite some issues. So the biggest issue we've seen is that most of the nesting attempts are actually failing at the egg stage. So there's a sort of a small, not a small fraction, but a fraction, so less than half of the breeding pairs account for the majority of all failures. So essentially, pairs are failing on eggs, repeating. So the box that had 13 nesting attempts, that was basically all failures. So some pairs are just not working out, and the ones that are successful are really successful. So why is this? Sort of like the easiest hypothesis is that there's some sort of genetic incompatibility in the pairs, and so potentially the population bottlenecked at some point. It was quite low. It's known to have been as low as 50 individuals, and if within those 50 a certain amount contributed to the remaining population, then there could be some kind of effect of genetic bottlenecking, and so it's definitely something that would be worth looking into. However, the good news is that the vast majority, so 92% of all eggs that hatch, so of all our nestlings, survive to fledgling. And this is the main kind of point of the nest boxes. So we've been able to successfully protect a vulnerable stage from predation. So, success. That's awesome. So just some other sort of results to go into that are kind of worth looking at. There were actually sort of differences showing up between the nest box types, so the materials. So the cedar boxes overall have had lower number of chicks fledged per clutch, higher number of failed nesting attempts, higher percentage of failed nesting attempts. I don't even want to look into whether these are statistically significant or not, because we know from experience, from having been out there, that the pairs, so it just so happens that a few pairs in the cedar boxes are just failing repeatedly on egg. This is a kind of like a clear case where you'd have some little level of pseudo-replication or just autocorrelation, so there's just, we don't think that there is really a big difference in due to the materials. The good news is that they do like the PVC boxes, which are much more, well, probably much more durable, even though the cedar boxes are doing well. So, but in the long term, PVC would probably last longer. So it is good news that the birds like that. So, almost 300 fledglings today out of the utility pole boxes in a year and a half. So the ever since we modified the nest boxes and the birds started using them, it's sort of just been chugging along, almost linear, although it is accelerating. So we hit 150 around March of last year, so that was after a year of nesting, and then we've doubled that in just over 6 months. So just chicks fledging all over the place. We've been seeing banded sali on and off base, so it's just incredibly exciting to get these types of resites, birds that, maybe wouldn't have been there if it weren't for the nest boxes. And we do have a fledgling survival study ongoing, so we know we're producing these birds, and now we're going to figure out whether they're surviving and why they're surviving. So just kind of quick summary. I think that this study does show that there is a place and there is utility for predator-resistant nest boxes in restoring sali populations on Guam. And along with that, there are kind of implications for ecosystem restoration. So Chris and Carolyn have talks later where they'll kind of go into some of the results as it kind of relates to seed dispersal. And so this is, so stick around for that. Anyways, thanks to the bird crew back there. It's been an awesome field season, and if you guys want to stand up, everyone could acknowledge the good work that you've been doing. Thanks to the folks up at Anderson, as well as MJ and NAFAC folks for the support. The funding is from Joint Region, and then there have been a ton of people involved in this project over kind of the 2.5 years, just, from the AWR to other agencies, USDA, and so it's just kind of, I can't even start kind of going into everyone, so happy to take any questions, and also plug our Facebook page real quick.
Thank you, Martin. We sure appreciate your work on Guam, and I love to see the research combined with the management to save the species. As an experienced bird biologist on Guam, I watched the aga be studied to extinction on Guam, and I like to see the management actions. And the thing about the starlings, the few individuals, that relates back to Suzanne's talk. I don't know if she's here, that's why I'm saying it. But, in the captive population, when they get those individuals, whether it's genetics or whatever, they use different management techniques to get around that. Unfortunately, you're seeing that in the wild where there's still a lot of these birds and we don't have to do that captively. So,
yeah, so
kudos to you.
I mean, and that's an interesting point because, we might not be able to manipulate the pairs, but there are things that potentially could be done down the line, like supplementing the population from sali from, somewhere else nearby, close enough to be the same subspecies and, potentially kind of boosting up the genetic diversity if we do figure out that that is the issue and it's deemed kind of, worthwhile. Yeah.
But one more really quick question and then I do get ready.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. I was wondering if there are any characteristics of those, like a quarter of the nest boxes that are not used, that, like in terms of proximity to the forest, or cedar versus PVC, or is it just a number? I guess 41 pairs are used in the nest boxes. Maybe it's just saturated population.
Yeah, so I'd have to say nothing obvious. We did, some of them are quite close to each other, so we did kind of install them at a pretty high density, and sometimes you have pairs hopping between nest boxes, and sometimes there'll be one kind of right nearby that isn't used, and the pair will just stick to the same nest box. So it could be a territory thing, but it's really hard to say because there are kind of counterexamples to that. So, we do have pairs nesting pretty, like, right up to the forest edge. So, yeah, I think Julie wants to add.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin. And before I introduce the next speaker, I'm going to auction off some keys.